Welcome to Sharing Torah Anytime here in our Shlomo. We are up to Perek Chav Beis, and again the shir is l'schos my dear friend Shalom Baruch Yehuda ben Malka Shalom Baruch Yehuda ben Malka. Hashem should help that should recover quickly, and we should all see him back with a smile. There's a tremendous chizik to see all the hundreds and hundreds of Yidden who came out to support his family. Hashem should bless them all. I just love this pasuk. This is, can't say it's my favorite pasuk in Nach, because unfortunately I don't know Nach, but up until here it's my favorite pasuk. Vayelach David Misham, Perek Chav Beis. Mamish Gewalt. Vayelach David Misham v'yimolet el ma'odas Adulam. So, the last episode of David was when this King Achish, the servants came to him and they said, "Hey, David is in town," and David made himself as if he was mad, as if he went crazy. And Achish said, "Hachasan mishugoyimani, I don't have enough crazy people around there," and he threw him out. And that was like the response that the Melech asked Hashem, "Why did you create craziness?" And here's where he discovered that everything in the world has a purpose, including madness, that it was a gift that saved him. Now after that, he runs away, he goes into this cave, so all of his brothers and his father hear that David is back in town, now he's a fugitive. Now you have to remember that his brothers weren't his best friends once upon a time. When he came to meet his brothers, they weren't too excited about him, especially since he was the one who got anointed and the other ones didn't. But at this point in time, I guess they're afraid that, if they're going to associate, if they're not going to join David, they're at risk of getting retribution from Shaul. They all came down to David, and this is my favorite pasuk. You know who gathered around David HaMelech? Kol ish motzok, every person who was b'mitzuka, he was in constraints, he was in tzekvetched, he had problems. Every problematic person. V'chol ish asher lo nosha, every person who had a debtor, who had a creditor running after him. Everyone who had a collection agency pounding on their doors running after him. So every problematic guy, every guy who had choivis, people were running after him. V'chol ish mar nefesh, every bitter person, every sad, melancholy person. Those are the people who hung around David in the cave. So you can imagine it was like this guerrilla vagabonds. Vayhi aleim l'sad, and David became the sad of the vagabonds. He became the sad of all the depressed. Everybody who colored out of the lines. Everybody who wasn't part of the normative system. David HaMelech became the king of the non-systemers. Vayu David aleim l'sad, vayu aleim l'sad, vayu imoy ka'arba me'asish. So he gathers 400, about 400 people who had no place in society, who are living in caves, and they're not afraid of anything because, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to kill me? Anyway, I have nothing to live for. So those are the people who David becomes a sad over. Vayelach David Misham Mitzpei Moav. David leaves from there. Mitzpei Moav Yemer al Melech Moav, and he goes to Melech Moav. Now David assumes that Moav is his friend. Why? Because David comes from Rus HaMoavi. David comes from Moav. So therefore he assumed that Moav, because there's some type of a familial or a tribal connection, that they're going to be kind. And he asks them, let my parents stay by you, because he's afraid that if they're going to stay there, Shaul might take vengeance upon them. Until I know how it's going to pan out. So David is taking care of his parents. He brings them to the Melech Moav, and he's with them as long as he was with Metzudah. Now a new figure pops into Shmuel, and we never met him before. A new Navi prophet comes up. His name is God HaNavi. And he says, don't stay in Metzudah. Go to Eretz Yehuda. Vayelech David vayava Yar Cheres. So David goes and he comes to Yar Cheres, and he leaves Moav and he comes back. Now Chazal tell us that when he left Moav, he left his parents behind the Moav. He himself came back, but as soon as he left, Moav killed his parents and his and his siblings. I don't know if his siblings, but at least his parents had killed. So at the end game, Moav didn't have any respect for David's trust in them from their familial bond. Vayishma Shaul kinoida David. So now the story begins that Shaul finds out that David is in town. Ha'anoshim kinoida David, anoshim asher itoi, and he has a whole band of guys around him, a whole band of vagabonds. V'Shaul yoshev b'giva tachas v'eshel b'rama. Shaul is sitting under the tree. I'm sorry?
No, vagabonds. I didn't pick up bad bands.
Vagabond. Vagabunden.
Because the roof said the second or the third time.
Uh-huh.
So now vagabond needs to say that I was thinking.
Shaul Yoshev Vagiva, and Shaul is sitting in the Giva. Tachas eshel berama v'chanise b'yadoi. And Shaul is standing there with his spear. Like in all the scenes, Shaul is always there with his spear, and he's very, he's like trigger friendly, trigger happy. He's very prone to using his spear. V'chanise b'yadoi chalavadav nitzav. He has all of his servants around him. Shaul says, listen up, you Bnei Yemini. Why is he saying Bnei Yemini? Because these are his people, who he's these are from his tribe, they're Yemini. Shaul is from Shevet Binyamin. He says, hey, this Ben Yishai dude, Ben Yishai is a derogatory term. It's like you're calling him, hey, Friedman. It's Ben Yishai. He says, is Ben Yishai going to give you fields and vineyards? Is he going to make you generals? He's going to make you officers? No, of course he's not. No, it's when you're calling somebody by his last name. I don't mean the Friedman part. It means when you're calling somebody Ben Yishai, you're not calling him by his first name. That's a derogatory way of calling somebody. It's like when you're calling somebody by his last name. Kikshartem kulchem alai, that all of you guys rebelled against me. Nobody even cheers with me. Bichros beni Ben Yishai, my own son Yonasan, made a pact, a covenant with Ben Yishai, and none of you get sick for me. Which means this is like the same thing, like Chazal tell us that, like by Moshe, when it says Vechal Moshe, it says Vechal Moshe means Moshe prayed, but Vechal is also a lotion of Choyle. Means Vechal Moshe got sick. He got sick over the problems over the Jews. So it's like Shaul is saying, none of you are my friends. You know how I know? Because none of you got sick over me. None of you care. How do I know you don't care? Because you didn't get sick. If you would really care, you'd get sick for me. So that's what he says. None of you even get sick for me. That my own son made my servant to be my enemy. And you're supporting David. None of you are with me. None of you care about me. This is the repetitious of the whole story of Shaul, how he gets paranoid, and he goes into, like, he hears these menshlich in his head. He trips out in his own mind, like in his own. He says a narrative in his head. Vayan doeg adoimi. So doeg adoimi now comes back, and this is the horrible story of doeg adoimi, who was the head shepherd, who was there when David HaMelech came to Noiv, and he begged and he asked the Kohen Gadol to give him some bread and a sword. And Doeg Adomi was there. Now Doeg Adomi was the head shepherd, but Chazal say it wasn't only he was the whole head shepherd, he was also like a chief Talmid Chacham. But in Pashat Pshat, he was a head shepherd. And Ha'adomi, I'm not sure if Ha'adomi means that he was actually from Edom. It probably doesn't mean it was Edom, probably does mean he was a Jew. But it means he was from the region which was Adoimi. Who Nitzav al Avdei Shol, he was. He was called Adoimi because he came from the region where Edom lived. Who Nitzav al Avdei Shol, vayomer Re'isi as ben Yishai vaynoeva. So now he's trying to prove his allegiance to the king and cash out in the moment to say that, hey, the king is vulnerable, that he needs people to support him, let me show him that I do. I saw Ben Yishai come noiva, El Achimelech ben Achitov, to Achimelech, who's the son of Achitov, the son of the Kohen Gadol, and I saw that Vayisha Loi B'Hashem, that he asked the Urim Vatumim. Now, if you remember the story, this part wasn't true. David HaMelech never asked the Urim Vatumim. He just asked for bread and a sword. But he added this part that he asked the Urim Vatumim, which he knew would enrage Shaul. Why would it enrage Shaul? Because he knew that whoever's asking the Urim Vatumim means that he's getting the divine connection. Shaul was officially the only one who was going to be asking the Vatumim. And here David is doing it. But Tzeidah Nasanlo, he also gave him Tzeidah as Cherev Goyas Aplishti Nasanlo. He gave him food. And he also gave him the sword of Goyis HaPlishti, which actually those two parts are true. It's only one part that wasn't true, which was the part of the Urim Vatumim. Now, David was... What? No, but David didn't ask the Urim Vatumim. It doesn't say in the pasuk that David asked. Now, I just want you to know that Achimelech ben Achitov HaKohen is a anicle from Eli HaKohen. It's a very important piece of information. So Vayishlach HaMelech Yirkes Achimelech ben Achitov HaKohen, that's called base of Kehanim Asher b'Noiv. So they call all of the Kehanim from Noiv. Now Noiv is the remnants of the Mishkan of Shiloh, and that's where there's, whatever sacrifices and the Urim Vatumim is going on. Listen up, you Ben Achitov. Same derogatory term of calling somebody by his last name, Ben Achitov. Now he's the Kohen Gadol. You don't call the Kohen Gadol Ben Achitov, but now he's putting him down. Vayomer hineni Adoni. Vayomer elav Shaul. Lama kshartam alai Atov and Yishai. Why did you gang up against me, conspire against me? Besitcho lo lechem v'cherev. You gave him bread, you gave him a sword, you asked Urim Vatumim, what's going on that you're ganging up against me? And now, remember the story that David, when Achimelech asked him what he's doing there alone, he told him that Shaul sent him on a secret mission. Now, Achimelech brought his story lock, stock, and barrel, that he was sent on a secret mission from Shaul, a clandestine mission, and he didn't even have time to bring along bread and to have a sword, and he has his Na'adim, his guys are hiding out somewhere in a secret location. He's on the way, he's dying from hunger, it's pikuach nefesh, and that's why he gave it to him. So, Achimelech is totally innocent in the story. He's playing the Kohen, doing his duties, and he's being sent by the king. Now, no, he wouldn't have known. He was the Kohen. It was like a community of prophets and Kohanim, living out in Noiv, in a secluded place. He would have no idea. So Achimelech is purely innocent in this place.
And a Navi, he would know.
No, he wasn't a Navi. Achimelech is just a Kohen. Achimelech is playing a Kohen. A Kohen Gadol, but a Kohen Gadol wasn't a Navi. He has no idea. He trusts him. He knows that he's the son-in-law of the king. He's the head general of the king. Whatever he tells him is probably true. And he says, now the issue is, we spoke about this already last week, that Chazal say that the whole problem started because of a small, silly mistake that Yonasan made. He didn't send him, when he came from the Rosh Chodesh Shuda, he didn't bring him bread. He was coming from a Rosh Chodesh Shuda, and he didn't bring him bread to send him off. That's where you learn this whole Tzeidah L'derech, that you have to send out this person, you have to support him, you have to give him bread, you have to give him Tzeidah L'derech, you have to give him food, support, something that he should be able to give him sustenance and strength to be able to keep on going. And he was sent without that, and that's why he had to go ask Noiv, and he had to go and to ask for the bread, and that's how Doimi saw him, and that's how this whole story that's happening now happens. Who was more loyal than David? He looks at the king, he has no idea what's going on here. He says, David is your son-in-law. He listens to you. He's the most honorable guy. You made him general, you made him a sad. Him? I began to ask that he should ask in Alehim? I don't know what you're talking about. And when he asked, and Khalil Ali, Chaz v'Shalom, I would never do something like that. And if he would ask, for the Urim V'Tumim, like in your name? Wouldn't I do it? Al Yosem HaMelech b'Avdei Davar. Don't place anything on me. B'chol Beis Avi Kilo Yada Avdecha B'Chazais. I knew nothing about this Davar Kot Noi Gadol. And from the narrative of the story, that was the way it was. But Shaul HaMelech is on this trip where he's in his own narrative. And he doesn't buy the story. And unfortunately, this is how the prophecy that Shmuel HaNavi told Eli, that because he didn't stamp out the corruption of his kids, he would lose the lineage. And here's where the end of the lineage of Shmuel, of Eli HaKohen happens with Noiv Ira Kaihanan. The Shaul tells the people around him, Soibu, turn around from Miso Kayane Hashem. Kill all the Kayane Hashem, ki gam yadam im David, their hands with David, v'chi yadu ki v'reichu. They knew that he was running away, and they supported him to be murdered against the king. And none of them told me, none of them revealed it to me, so they conspired against me too. But the Avdei HaMelech l'shloich es yadam l'vgoyam b'chayan Hashem. The Avdei HaMelech, they didn't want to hurt, they didn't want to be pagay and kayane Hashem. And even though the king said it black and white, they were afraid to kill the holy priests. And it seems like the Avdei HaMelech didn't either believe that the holy priest had any bad intention against the king. The story didn't line up. The people from the outside, the story didn't line up. But here's where the clincher comes in, that Vayomer HaMelech l'doyeg soiv ato ufga b'kayanim. So you go do the job. Vayisoiv doyeg v'adoymi vayivgahu b'kayanim. And Doeg Adomi went, and he killed the Kayanim. He slaughtered on that day, he killed on that day 85 noise ephod bod. 85 Kayanim were carrying the ephod. Now, the Urim V'Tumim is only carried by one Kohen. There's only one Urim V'Tumim. So when it says that there was 85 people who were wearing the ephod, it doesn't mean that 85 Kayanim were wearing Urim V'Tumim. One Kohen Gadol wears Urim V'Tumim, but what would happen if the Kohen Gadol wasn't in town? So then another Kohen was able to wear the Urim V'Tumim. So that's what it means. That 85 Kohanim were noise ephod who were capable of wearing the Urim V'Tumim got killed on that day from Doeg Adoimi. There's Noiv Ira Kayanim, and the city of the Kayanim, Noiv Hiko Lefichera, they slaughtered them by sword. Me'ishvad Isha Me'oil Vad Yoineg V'shoir V'chamor V'sel Leficharev. Man and woman, from nursing, from Me'oil Vad Yoineg, to a nursing baby till a young child, V'shoir V'chamor V'sel Leficharev, everything was slaughtered. There was one child that ran away. This was the end of the lineage of Eli, besides for one Einikel. One Einikel who ran away. V'yimolet ben echod l'Achimelech ben Achitov. One Einikel l'Shmei of Yasar. Where did he run? Vayivrach achrei David. He ran to David. Vayaged of Yasar l'David ki harak Shaul es Kehane Hashem. And he told David that Shaul killed the priest of God. And David felt very guilty. I knew on that day when Doeg Adoimi was there, that he's going to tattle on me to show. Now I just remember, when I was reading this, I remember there was a story in Afghanistan, a very famous story, like a Navy SEAL. It was like this Navy SEAL story where they landed a mission of a whole bunch of Navy SEALs. I don't remember if it was 11 or 16 or whatever it was, that they landed in the middle of a field on a mission. And when they were dropped off, they landed in the middle of a field filled with sheep and a few shepherds. Or one shepherd. It was a mistake that they landed. They didn't chap that when they're landing. And they had a debate by the SEALs if they should kill that shepherd or not. Now the shepherd is an innocent guy. He's just shepherding a sheep. But on the other hand, if they wouldn't kill him, then they were afraid that he's going to tattle on them and he's going to tell Al-Qaeda or whoever it was that they're there. The head of the Navy SEALs decided that it wasn't morally conscionable, it wasn't right that he should kill them. The guy didn't want to let him live. They warned him to let him live. And of course he went and he massed on them and he tattled on them. And the end was that all of the Navy SEALs got killed besides one. Besides one, the reason why, because he fell into like a camp of Bedouins, and the Bedouins have like a Messiah of Achnasas Archim or something, and that they hit him, they took him in, he survived, and it became like a major case study. What do you do in such a case? What do you do like in the case of Doigo Adoimi? What do you do when you show up there, you're running away, you're in the Mishkan, there's Doigo Adoimi who's loyal to the king, but he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything right now. Is it justified to kill him or not? So again, in this story, obviously, David didn't do anything to him, even though he was holding the sword of Goliath. He didn't do anything to him. And at the end, because he didn't do anything to him, he slaughtered the whole Ida Kehanim of Noiv. And David felt very guilty. And he said, Yodati that he's going to tattle on me. I am the reason. That I wasn't on guard on the slaughter or the killing of all of Kol Nefesh Beis Avicha. Shvo iti, you stay with me now. Al tiro, ki asher yevakesh es nafshi yevakesh es nafshecha. Whoever is going to try to bring me down as yevakesh es nafshecha means he's going to protect him for whatever it costs. Ki mishmer es ato imodi, you're precious to me like my life, and I'm going to help you however I could. He felt extremely guilty, and he took a responsibility to keep that last lineage of the Kehanic family from Eli alive. Now the ironic part of the story is that where did the ephod, what happened to the Urim V'Tumim? What happened to the Urim V'Tumim that was a noiv? Who took it? The last person alive. Eviasa. So when Eviasa ran away, he took the Urim V'Tumim. So now where's the Urim V'Tumim? By David. So ironically, because he killed Noiva Kayanim, that's how Shaul brought the Urim V'Tumim to David. So now David has the greatest connection to the divine that was around in his camp, with his 400 vagabunden, with his 400 guerrilla chevra.
If you can call this, it doesn't specify strongly that this was the major win over here. It's not manipulating with the Urim V'Tumim is such a big hype.
Go on, we're going to read it.
It's all over here. Hashem wants us to understand that killing people for the Urim V'Tumim it happened, but it's not like, whoa, we got Urim V'Tumim, I don't see it.
No, come along.
It's happening?
Give it another few psikim. Come along. No. Vayagidu leDavid le'Imoed. We don't got anything. Everything is open.
You don't got anything. I'm not saying anything. You got a couple.
Vayagidu leDavid le'Imoed. Everybody say, come along. Vayagidu l'chaim etchkindelech. Vayagidu leDavid le'Imoed. Perek Chav Gimel, they tell David, hey, hine plishtim nilchamim ba'ki'ilah. The plishtim sent a skirmish. There's a skirmish going on in Ke'ilah, which is one of the cities. They're sacking the grain houses, the storage for the grain. Vayishal David Bashem. So here David asks the Urim V'Tumim. That's how the Urim V'Tumim got into David's hands because of Eviasar. So he says, should I go hit these Plishtim? Should I go fight? Now this is the first time where David HaMelech is communicating with the Urim V'Tumim, because Shaul was upset that Ki'ilu Eviasar, that David asked Eviasar the Urim V'Tumim. When Eviasar, David never asked. David never asked the Urim V'Tumim. Because Shaul was afraid he asked of the Urim V'Tumim, he slaughtered the whole Ida Kayanim, and that's how the Urim V'Tumim actually get to David, and that's how David gets to ask the Urim V'Tumim. And
Shaul officially king now?
Shaul is king.
Shaul is king. David is running because he's
David is running away.
Afraid of David because David is a clear threat to his kingdom.
He's, on the one hand, he loves him, and he took him for a son-in-law, and he makes him into a general. On the other hand, he's paranoid from him. Now, Shaul knows already that he lost the kingship, but he doesn't want to accept it, even though Shaul told it in the fetish. And David was anointed, but he wasn't officially made into a king yet. But David never ever tells anybody that he was anointed. So it's like this Metzias, it's a reality that was never discussed openly. Go hit him and save Ke'ilah. V'yemer anshe David Elov, Hinanachnu poi b'Yehuda Yereim. We're here and we're afraid of Shaul. V'af ki neilech Ke'ilah marchis plishtim. Now, shouldn't we be even more afraid if we're going to go against the Plishtim? And obviously Shaul's not going to help us. He's going to let us get slaughtered. Yosef oy David l'shal Hashem. So David asks again the Urim v'Tumim, because he has the Urim v'Tumim with him. And the greatest military strategy that a person had in the ancient world was the ability to ask the Urim v'Tumim directives what to do. Because that was like the conduit. Vayaneu Hashem vayomer kum reid Ke'ilah, go down to Ke'ilah, ki ani noisin as Plishtim b'yadecha, I'm going to give the Plishtim in your hands. He had 400, assume we're going to see 600, but he had 400 people with him who nobody else looked at. 400 rebels, depressed people, people who had credit debtors. Vayelech David v'anoshav Ke'ilah vayelachim beplishtim. He goes out to battle with his 400 Chavre vayinag es mikneim vayach bam makah gedoyle v'yesh David es yesh v'Ke'ilah. So he smites down the Plishtim, he knocks them out, and he saves the people of Ke'ilah. Hooray! Vahi b'v'royach Avyasar ben Achimelech al David Ke'ilah. So Avyasar, when Avyasar ran to Achimelech, to David Ke'ilah, ephod yadav b'yadoi, the ephod came down in his hands. That's what the pasuk says of the fetish, that he was the one who brought the ephod, because he was the last remnant of the Kohen Gadol, and that's how he had the adrach of a Yugad l'Shaul kibod David Ke'ilah. So now Shaul finds out that David is winning battles in Ke'ilah of him. Shaul, that's great. Nikar God locked him in my hands. Why? Because he came into a city that has a gate and a lock. Now this Ke'ilah was a walled city. A walled city meant that there was a gate and a lock. And if you got somebody in a gate and a lock, and you locked the gate, then you had him. So he gathers all the troops and he says, hey, let's go get Shaul, David. And David hears that Shaul's after him. Bring me the ephod. Let me ask the Urim v'Tumim what to do next. And David asks, Hashem Elokei Yisrael, Shomoy Hashem Avdecha, Ki Mevakei Shaul Lovoy El Ke'ilah L'Shaches Lo'ir Bavuri. I heard that Shaul is coming down to Ke'ilah in order to get me. Hayazgiruni Valley Ke'ilah V'Yodoi. Will the people of Ke'ilah give him in my hand, in his hand? Hayeret Shaul Kash Hashem Avdecha. Is Shaul going to come down like I heard? Hashem Elokei Yisrael Haged No Lavdecha. Tell me the answer. Now, the way how the Urim v'Tumim worked was it only answered one question at one time. And it didn't answer, it worked with codes. It worked with these osias like a Morse code. So when you saw letters, when you saw a certain stone, you had to figure out what the words meant. And it only answered one answer to one question. Here, David asks two questions. The last question he asked was, Hayeret Shaul. Will Shaul be coming down? So Vayomer Hashem, Yered, he's coming down. So then he goes back and he asks the question again, this time the first question, which didn't get answered because the Urim v'Tumim only answered the second question. Vayomer David, Hayazgiru v'ali Ke'ilah oisi v'sanshe b'yad Shaul. Are the people of Ke'ilah going to give me over in the hands of Shaul? Are they going to backstab me and give me over? Vayomer Hashem, Yazgiru. They're going to give you over. Even though you saved them, they're going to give you over because logically they're afraid of Shaul. Don't forget that Shaul just killed out the whole Noiv Ir Kayanim, and everybody's petrified that this madman of a king is going to go slaughter the whole place. Vayokem David v'Anoshav. So now that he knows that the king is after him, king's coming down, and that the people are not going to protect him, even though he saved them. Vayokem David v'Anoshav k'shei shmeyos ish. 600. Now he's up to 400. He's up to 600 because he got more people to join him because of his success in Ke'ilah. So even though the people of Ke'ilah were not going to support him and protect him, there were still some people of Ke'ilah who joined his camp and became from David's Chassidim. These were the first Breslov Chassidim. The first.
The way he speaks to the Ephod gives you a clue that, you know, it's just kind of shoes. I hear you that it works with code, but I got questions for you, Hashem. You know?
Gewalt. So they go out of Ke'ilah. Vayishalchu b'asher yishalochu. So they wander from place to place. L'shol who got kinunim Rav David meKe'ilah vayechdal lot says. So Shol hears that they escaped from Ke'ilah. Now he doesn't have the strategy of locking them in, so he stops the attack. Vayeshev David b'midbar b'mtzudos. So David settles in the midbar b'mtzudos. Vayeshev b'hor b'midbar zif. And Shaul, every opportunity he has, he's keeping on going after David. Every single time he almost gets him, Hashem saves him and he gets him out. And David sees that Shaul's out to get him, out to kill him. And David is in the desert of Ziph, which is in Chorisha. So now Yonasan, who's the guy who made the pact with him, who really should have been the heir to the throne, who's giving up his position in order to be best friends with David, he suddenly shows up on the scene again. I think it means that he gave him like a handshake in the name of God, or that he was mechazik him in the covenant. He says, don't be afraid, the hand of my father won't reach you. Here he tells it in black and white. He gives over the throne, or he's the heir. He says, you're going to be the melech on the Jews, on the Yidden. I'll be your Mishnah. I'm going to be your second in command. And you should know my father also knows it, even though he doesn't say it. And that's why he's so upset, because he senses and his intuition tells him that you're going to be the one that's going to take over. They again make a covenant before Hashem. And Yonasan returns back home. And they again confirm their covenant between themselves that they would remain loyal to each other, and that he's going to be there for him at all costs. And if you remember last time they made this covenant, he made David promise him that he wouldn't harm his progeny, his kids. Vayalu zifim el shol agiv also. They go up to Givas. They go up to Zifim lemer haloi David mistater imanu b'mtzodes b'chorsho. So these Zifim, these are the people from the city of Zif. They go now and they tattle and they say David is hiding up with us b'mtzodes b'chorsho. Begivas hachakilo asher miyamin hayeshimoin. So they give away David's location. Whatever you want to do, we're going to capture him. We're going to get the bounty. We're going to capture him and bring him to the king. He says, blessed you be to Hashem, because you had rachmanas on me. You pity me. Go find me the place where he's hiding out. They say he's very shrewd. Make sure that you actually know where he is. Find all the places where he can hide out. And bring me back good information, detailed information where he could be hiding out. I'm going to go with you. It will be in the land. We're going to close in on him. So these Anshe Zif, who are tattling on David, so they're hiding out in Midbar Mo'in and Arava. So Shaul's people are coming to find him again. They tell David once again, Shaul's coming to get you. He goes down the stone. Shaul hears where he is. Once again, he has spies tracking David, GPS system. David midbar moin. He gets him midbar moin. Shaul's on one side of the mountain, he's on the other side of the mountain. David as David is trying to escape with all he got, mipnei Shaul. Shaul v'anoshav uitrim el David v'anoshav l'tavsam. They're closing in on him. They're making a circle around this mountain in order to close in on him. Now, if he's on the top of the mountain, they close in on the bottom, they got him. If they make the circle around him. If they're able to make the circle around him, and they're closing in on David. And once again, David is in a stuck position. And again, the whole story of Shaul and David is this impossible story where I just want to go back just in a second, to recap the whole story in a nutshell. Just to understand how crazy it is. Shaul never wanted to be king. Shaul was a farm boy who had donkeys. Shaul was Shaul was a beautiful person. He was a tzaddik. It doesn't mention anywhere in all of the Tanakh. The reason he was a tzaddik, he didn't have any taivas. He didn't do any of the Avedis that David HaMelech does or doesn't do later. Shaul was a tzaddik. It means that he was like a ben shana. He was like pure like a ben shana. He only became king because the Jews were mispal. They weren't mispal. They came to Shmuel HaNavi and they said, "We want a king. Nia melech chol hagoyim. We want a king. We want a government like the goyim have." And Shmuel begged them and he said, "Don't do it. I'm telling you, it's just going to end up worse." And they said, "No, we want it." So that's how Shaul was thrust into a position that he was never meant to be in. And it plays out all the time that he tries his best he could, but he can't. He doesn't know how to do it. And it gets complicated. Now eventually it gets taken away from him and it gets given to David. But once it's given over to David, Shaul is not ready to give up on his kingdom. He has it already, and there's no peaceful transition of power. But he doesn't know for sure who is going to take him over. He just knows that he lost it, but David, he doesn't know.
And King Shaul came to Shaul in the kingdom and said Hashem wants something else. Is that what's happening? Same Navi that backed Shaul.
Correct. The same Navi, Shmuel HaNavi, who backed Shaul, he told Shaul that the game's over. Now, David, in one hand, becomes very big, in the other hand, he gets chased. Shaul is trying to kill him again and again. Every single time he tries to get him, Mamash is an inch away from his life. He escapes, and here's the last time, not the last, where at this point he is Mamash closed in on him. Umalach bo'el Shaul emer, and a shliach comes to Shaul and says, "Maharav alecha, let's leave fast." Ki pashtum plishtim ala aretz. The plishtim now entered the land. There's an invasion from the plishtim. We don't have any time to get David. If you're going to stick it out with David, you're not going to have a country to come back. Get out of here. Vayoshev Shaul mirdoi v'achrei David. He stops chasing after David, even though he mamash had him. He was cornered. Vayelech likras plishtim. Goes after the plishtim. Alkein kodem lamokem u'selah machloikes. They called it that the stone where there was two camps. Vayal David misham, and David went up from that place. Vayeshev im tzodos ein gedi, and he hid out in ein gedi. And that's the story of Rabbi Isai, of the continuous Rachmei Hashem that goes through Navi to us.
Shaul was the first king.